Three police officers pinned a black woman against the courthouse wall, zip-tied her wrists behind her back, and radioed in the reason with 2 words, talking back. She never raised her voice. She never resisted. She just kept saying one sentence over and over as they dragged her toward the cruiser, a sentence none of them bothered to listen to. 6 minutes later, that sentence would end one of their careers. Here's exactly how it happened. The courthouse steps were still wet from the morning rain when Renata Cole pulled her old gray Honda into the visitor's lot instead of her reserved spot. Her reserved spot had a flat tire's worth of glass scattered across it. Some idiot had smashed a bottle there overnight, so she parked 50 feet farther than usual, grabbed her leather satchel, and started walking. She had 11 minutes before she needed to be on the bench. She didn't know that in 6 of those 11 minutes, she would be lying face down on cold marble with her wrists zip-tied behind her back. Renata Cole was 44 years old. She'd worked in this building, in one role or another, for most of her adult life. She'd built her whole career on quiet discipline, the kind of person who read every file twice, who remembered the names of the court clerk's children, who never raised her voice because she'd learned a long time ago that volume was what people reached for when they didn't have control. She hadn't always been that calm. In her 20s, fresh out of law school and working as a public defender, she used to argue louder than anyone in the room, convinced that conviction alone could win a case. It took her 3 lost trials and 1 long night with a mentor who told her flatly, "Nobody remembers what you shouted, they remember what you proved," before she rebuilt herself from the ground up, quieter, steadier, harder to shake. She carried that lesson into every year that followed, through defense work, through the exhausting climb toward the bench, through 3 years of wearing a robe that still, some mornings, felt borrowed. That morning, she was wearing a tan trench coat over a plain white blouse. Underneath her arm, tucked half out of sight, was a small wooden gavel, an odd thing for a visitor to be carrying, if anyone had thought to ask. She was maybe 30 feet from the courthouse entrance when Officer Dale Whitfield stepped into her path. "Ma'am, I need you to stop right there." She stopped. Of course she stopped. She'd spent a career telling people to respect an order the first time it was given. "Good morning, officer. Is there a problem?" "We got a call about a disturbance near the east entrance. Woman matching your description." "I just arrived. I've been driving for the last 40 minutes. She said it evenly, the voice of someone used to being believed. Whitfield's eyes moved over her, the coat, the satchel, the object in her hand. "What's that in your hand?" "A gavel." A pause. The kind of pause that, if you've ever watched footage of these moments afterward, you can see coiling into something. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to put that down and step over here." This is where it always turns, not in the shouting, in the tone, the exact half-second where someone decides they've already made up their mind about you before you've said a single defensive word. "I have court in 9 minutes. I'm an officer of this court. If there's a report, I'm happy to clear it up inside with my ID. "Ma'am, I didn't ask for your resume. I asked you to put the object down." 2 more officers had drifted over by now. Officer Grady Sims, younger, quieter, hanging half a step back, and Sergeant Paul Vickers, who had the look of a man who'd worked this exact stretch of sidewalk for 15 years and had opinions about who belonged on it. "You're not listening to me." And here is the only place in the whole encounter where her voice actually rose, not into a shout, just into something firmer. "I am telling you who I am. Ask someone inside. Radio the clerk's office. I am not resisting anything. I am asking you to verify." "That's enough. Turn around."
"I am not going to turn around until—" "She's talking back," Whitfield said. Not to her, to Sims, to the radio clipped at his shoulder, to whoever might be listening later. Cuff her for talking back. What happened next took 4 seconds. 4 seconds that a bystander named Theo Ruiz, waiting for a bus across the street, happened to catch on his phone because he'd been filming the wet, gray morning for no reason at all, the way people do now, always half recording the world just in case. Whitfield grabbed her wrist. Renata didn't pull away. She knew better, had spent years in courtrooms hearing exactly how pulled away gets written up in incident reports, regardless of what it actually looked like. But she did turn her head, still talking, still trying to get one clear sentence out before her arm was wrenched up behind her back. "I am a sitting judge in this. Save it for booking." The gavel clattered onto the wet concrete. Nobody picked it up. They put her face first against the courthouse's stone facade. A woman walking past gasped audibly. Someone else said, "Oh my God," under their breath. The specific tone of someone who already knows they're watching something that's going to matter later, that they'll be asked about, that they'll replay in their head for months. A man in a delivery uniform slowed his cart to a stop entirely, just staring, unsure whether stepping closer would help or make things worse. Sergeant Vickers stood with his arms crossed, watching, not stopping it. "Talking back like that gets people hurt," he said, mostly to nobody. "You gotta learn to just comply." Renata Cole did not scream. She did not cry. She said once, very clearly into the stone in front of her face, "You are making a serious mistake, and I want your badge numbers." "You can file a complaint," Whitfield said, snapping the second zip tie shut. "Everybody's got a complaint." They walked her, not dragged, but close to it, one hand locked around each elbow down the side steps toward a waiting cruiser, away from the main entrance where court was, at that exact moment, supposed to begin. It was 8:59 a.m. At 8:58, inside the building, Bailiff Marcus Whitlow looked at his watch, looked at the empty bench, and radioed the clerk's office. "Judge Cole isn't in yet. Anybody hear from her?" At 8:59, a young court reporter named Priya Anand, glancing out a second-floor window while grabbing coffee, saw 3 officers walking a cuffed woman in a tan coat toward the parking lot and thought distantly, "That looks like—" And then she looked again. "Oh no," she said out loud to no one. "Oh no, no, no." Here is the part that, if you've watched enough of these stories unfold in real time in real cities, you already know is coming. But knowing it doesn't make it land any softer. Priya didn't call security. She called the courthouse's chief administrative judge directly, a woman named Judge Holloway, who had personally sworn in Renata Cole 3 years earlier. They're arresting Judge Cole, outside, right now. Holloway didn't ask questions. She grabbed her own clerk and moved, coat half on, down 2 flights of stairs faster than anyone had seen her move in years. By the time she reached the parking lot, Renata was already in the back of the cruiser, wrists cuffed, staring straight ahead through the wet glass with the specific stillness of someone who has decided that the only power she has left in this moment is to not give them a single reaction. Judge Holloway walked directly up to the driver's side window and rapped on it hard, twice. Sergeant Vickers rolled it down, already annoyed. "Ma'am, I need you to step back." "That," Judge Holloway said, pointing at the woman in the back seat, "is Judge Renata Cole. She has presided in this building for 3 years. She was scheduled to hear 41 cases this morning, including yours, Sergeant, from 18 months ago. The excessive force review the department's still sitting on." The color drained out of Vickers' face in real time. "She's not resisting anything," Holloway continued. "She's telling you exactly who she is, and you decided not to listen because you already decided what you were looking at before she opened her mouth." Whitfield, standing beside the car, said nothing. There was nothing to say. His body camera recorded every second of it, and unlike most stories like this one didn't need enhancement, didn't need context added later by a review board trying to be generous. It was all just there. Clean audio, clear video, a woman calmly identifying herself for 4 straight minutes while 3 armed men decided her calm was the problem.
They took the cuffs off her in the parking lot in front of a small and growing crowd of court staff who had come out to see it for themselves. Renata rubbed her wrists once, the only visible sign that anything had happened to her at all, and picked her gavel up off the wet ground herself. Nobody offered to hand it to her. "I'd like everyone's name," she said, not shouted, not shaking, exactly as steady as it had been the entire time, and I'd like it in writing by end of day. Then she walked into the courthouse, past the officers who'd cuffed her, past Sergeant Vickers, whose case she now knew by rule she would have to recuse herself from, and up to her own courtroom, 11 minutes late, wrists still faintly marked, and put on her robe like nothing at all had happened. She did not mention it from the bench that day. She didn't need to. Theo Ruiz's 4 seconds of footage did the mentioning for her. By that evening, it had 900,000 views. By the next morning, 4 million. By the end of the week, it had crossed 22 million, translated into 6 languages, stitched and reacted to by strangers on every corner of the internet who would never set foot in that city. News vans parked outside the courthouse for 3 straight days. Legal commentators picked apart the body camera footage frame by frame. A civil rights attorney in another state used it in a law school lecture on implicit bias within employees within a week of it going viral. The caption under the original clip was simple: "Cops arrested this woman for talking back outside the courthouse. She was actually the judge." Strangers who had never met Renata Cole found themselves furious on her behalf, replaying the 4 minutes over and over, counting out loud in comment sections exactly how many times she said the word judge before anyone bothered to check. Some counted 5, some counted 6. The number didn't really matter. What mattered was that it was more than 0, and 0 was the number of times anyone had actually listened. The department placed Whitfield on administrative leave within 48 hours, but leave wasn't where it ended. 2 weeks later, after an internal review board watched the same body camera footage frame by frame, alongside 3 other complaints that had quietly stacked up in his file over the years, Whitfield was terminated outright. Not suspended, not reassigned, but walked out of the building he'd worked in for 11 years with a box under his arm, in a revoked badge on the front desk behind him. Vickers, whose excessive force case had sat unresolved for a year and a half, suddenly found it moving through review at a speed nobody could quite explain, though everybody understood exactly why. When the review finally closed, it closed against him, a formal finding of misconduct, a demotion from sergeant, and a note in his file that would follow him for the rest of his career, the kind of note that ends promotions before they start. Sims, the youngest, the quietest, was the only one who wrote a personal letter, not to Renata, but to the review board, admitting that he'd known within the first 10 seconds that something was wrong and said nothing, because saying something meant going against 2 more senior officers on a sidewalk in front of witnesses. He kept his job. He also requested, on his own, to be reassigned to a unit that required de-escalation retraining and completed it without being told to. Renata read that letter. She didn't respond to it publicly, but people who knew her said that she kept it in her desk drawer for a long time afterward, not as forgiveness exactly, but as the one piece of honesty that had come out of the whole thing without being forced out by a camera. She gave one interview, 3 weeks later, to a local paper, and in it she said one thing that ended up quoted more than anything else from that day. "I wasn't upset that they didn't recognize me. I was upset that it took them 4 minutes of me calmly telling them the truth before they even considered it might be the truth. That's not about my job. That's about what happens to people who don't have a title behind them to eventually save them." She went back to work the next Monday. Same bench, same reserved parking spot, glass finally swept up. Same gavel, still faintly scuffed on one corner from where it hit the wet concrete that morning. She never had it replaced. "Because some marks," she said once to a clerk who asked, "are worth keeping, not as a wound, as a reminder of exactly how close, calm, and cuffed can sit next to each other for the wrong person, on the wrong morning, in front of the wrong set of eyes that had already decided what they were looking at before anyone said a word." If this story hit you the way it hit us, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We post stories like this every week, and you don't want to miss the next one. Drop a comment below. If you were in Renata's position, would you have stayed calm, or would you have fought back? Let us know. And if you want to see more stories about people who were underestimated until the moment everything changed, check the video on your screen right now. We'll see you in the next one.